ביאור משנה זין, the explanation for משנה זין. במשנה הקודמת למדנו, in the previous Mishnah we learned, עודהו אסל על כתפו, when the basket is still on his shoulder, קורא, he reads. What does he read? מהגעתי היום להשם אלוקיך, he reads all from the entire parasha, all the things that I just read. עד שגומר כל הפרשה, until he reads the entire parasha. ואין קוראים אותה, and the law is that you have to read it בלשון הקודש. You have to read it in Hebrew. So where does it say you have to read it in Hebrew? We see soon. שכתוב במקרא ביקורים, because it says, when it's coming about the declaration of ביקורים, it says, וענית ואמרת. וענית ואמרת. And you answered and you said, or you raised your voice and you said, it depends on the translation. You answered and you said, and you raised your voice. But the word anita is a specific word that you can find it in other places. Let's see. And anita ve'amata לפני השם אלוקיך. ולהלן הוא אומר, and further on we're going to learn that when the Jews came in to Eretz Israel, and you remember the Leviim was down in the valley, and some of the Jews were on Har Grizim and one on Har Eibal. So it also says to the Leviim and the Kohanim also there, ve'anita ve'amarta. Okay. The same declaration. ve'anu הלוויים ve'amru. Again, the Levites had to make a declaration. מה ענייה האמורה להלן בלשון הקודש? Just that the Leviim later on were speaking Hebrew, had to speak Hebrew. Like it says, how do you know that was in Hebrew? So it says, look in the Gemara Bavli, it will explain to you how do we know they have in Hebrew. Afkan belashon hakodesh, but nevertheless, also over here, they have to have in Hebrew. And now we're going to get to learn some halachot about this. So it says, how did it used to happen? So it says it used to happen like this. Barishona, in the beginning, when the Bikurim was first brought in Eretz Israel, כל מי שיודע לקרות, anybody who knew how to read, את פרשת הביקורים בלשון הקודש, he knew how to read ביקורים in Hebrew, קורא, he used to read בעצמו. You have to remember, this is a thing that most people don't know, but there were some kings that pushed education in Eretz Israel. But some kings throughout the time, there was no push in education, and you would have times in the land of Israel that 99% of Israelim, of Israel, I don't know if 99%, but the vast majority, 90% at least, did not know how to read and write. They were farmers. You know, farmers, like in Russia. You know, how many people are farmers in Russia in the old times? Nobody knew how to read and write. So it says, Kol mi she'eno yoda likro. So many people used to come, they don't know Hebrew, they didn't speak Hebrew in Eretz Israel, they spoke Aramaic. So they didn't know how to read. They didn't know what to say. שלא היו כולם יודעים לשון הקודש. Not all of them knew Hebrew. So what did they do? זה מקרים אותו. So קוראים לפניו את הפרשה, והוא עונה אחר הקורא. So there will be somebody over there who says, you don't know? Say after me. Hashem, Hashem. Amar, Amar. Yeah? One, word by word. נמנעו מלהביא. That's why some of them became embarrassed. It says, I'm going to come over there, and then they're not going to say, and somebody has to read it for me, and it's not nice. אלא שאינם יודעים לקרות מפני הבושה. Those who didn't know how to read because they were ashamed. There were many people who didn't bring bikurim because of that. So now the people are not bringing bikurim because they're ashamed. So what did they do? התקינו חכמים, so the sages made a decree. He said, you know what? I don't care if you know how to read, I don't know if you don't know how to read, you cannot read. Nobody's allowed to read anymore. שיהיו מקרים את מי שיודע ואת מי שאינו יודע. Now there's going to be one person, he's going to be reading for everybody else. And that's it, and then nobody's going to be embarrassed. You know, you don't know, nobody knows. שאף היודע לקרוא, that even the one who knows how to read, אינו קורא בעצמו, he doesn't read by himself. אלא מקרים אותו. But we read it for him. והסמיכו תקנה זו על מה שכתוב, וענית ואמרת. It says, and you
Answer and said.
So it says, and why is it? It says, and you answer and said. It says somebody is going to read and you're going to answer. Somebody is going to read and you're going to answer.
This is how they learn.
This is asmachta. That's right, asmachta. Ve'ein aniya ela mipnei acherim. It says you answer after somebody else read it. Just to bring it, there's many rules in Torah that came from this Bikurim Mishnah. There's actually machloket, we'll talk about it soon, that comes in halacha because of this Mishnah. One of the things in Israel, they used to bury people, you know, if you've been to a funeral in Israel, it's completely different than a funeral in America. A funeral in Israel, if you're in America, you have a nice casket and it looks very, very nice, and you know, sometimes it can cost $20,000, $30,000 per casket. People put all kind of gold and silvers and whatever they want in the casket. In Eretz Israel, everybody has been buried. There's no caskets, there's no nothing, just betachrichim. Just tachrichim. When did it start? Eretz Israel used to be, throughout the time, especially after the exile, very hard place to live. And a lot of people did not have money. So when there were funerals, somebody's family died, the obligation on the sons, on the family, to bury the person, the expectation was so high that you see the rich people bringing everybody in a fancy casket, and they couldn't afford to bring a fancy casket, so they would leave the dead out of embarrassment. They didn't want to make people come to the funeral. They would leave dead people in the street because they say it's more embarrassing than to come to a funeral like this. So the sages said in Israel, they made a decree. He says, I don't care how rich you are, I don't care how poor you are, everybody is going to be buried in the cheapest way possible.
Wow.
Because of that, you see, it's exactly like...
I was thinking it's from Afarta Idem and Afarta Shuk.
No, it's a decree. People used to bury in caskets, in fancy caskets. And because of the people were embarrassed and they left the dead in the street, the sages came in Israel and they said, guys, everybody has to be buried in Israel. Same standard. And the cheapest one. Which means there's no caskets at all, just tachrichim. There's actually another rule that we learn from here, and it's actually machloket. I think the machloket, if I'm not mistaken, is Tosfos and Rash. What's the other rule which is very similar to this? It's the reading of the Torah. In the old times, the reading of the Torah, when people would read the Torah, you would call somebody up to the Torah, Ya'amod Reuven ben Shimon, and Reuven, the son of Shimon, would come up to the Torah, and he would read the Torah. And what happened was, it happened that people were embarrassed to come because some of them did not know how to read.
And if they call him to the Torah, he said, I don't know how to read.
He's embarrassed. Like that's right. So Tosfos says, so what happened? So they learned, first of all, the decree of Bikurim was established. That was the first thing that was established. So they learned from Bikurim, just from Bikurim to come, and that somebody else reads whether you know it or you don't. So now we have the old thing of a Bal Koire, somebody who reads for everybody else. So it comes from Bikurim, that's right, it says. Right. That's what Tosfos says. The Rash says nonsense. I don't agree with you at all. He says it cannot be. And I'll tell you why Tosfos it cannot be. It's very, very nice what you're saying, but that's not the reason. So it says, why it's not the reason? It says Bikurim is a mitzvah. So the sages are going to be adamant that you bring the mitzvah, they're protecting a mitzvah. Over here, there's no mitzvah to come up to the Torah. So who says you need to come up to the Torah? Don't come up to the Torah. Let only those people, he says, let only those people who know how to read to come up to the Torah. And whoever doesn't know how to read should go learn. He says, don't come and learn.
It easy for them.
That's right. It says, over here, Bikurim is a mitzvah. You're afraid not going to be mitzvah. Over there, it's on a mitzvah. So you can't learn it from there. So it says, so how did it happen that people have a Bal Koire? You ask the Rash. So the Rash says, I'll tell you how it happened. Because what happened was that you need to read the Torah in Ta'amim. And everybody thinks that he knows how to read. So what used to happen in the things, they wouldn't call people up. The Gabbai would only call people that he knows, they know how to read. But then the guy thinks he knows how to read, and he used to come and he used to say, I know how to read, call me up. And he used to call him up, and he doesn't know how to read, and then nobody's made their obligation. So it says to prevent that problem at all. Because of the fights. It says they used to have fights in the Torah. So it's got nothing to do with Bikurim. It's because of the fights. It says the reason why we're doing it because people were fighting in the synagogues. I know how to read. I don't know how to read. So they said nobody reads except this guy. Baal Koreh reads, and that's it. That's how you think. And everything you see. And you see how dangerous it is when you learn from one. When I said the Tosfos in the beginning, everybody says, you have for sure to learn from Bikurim. No. You have to be very careful. Bikurim is a mitzvah, and this is not a mitzvah. It's not a proof. Maybe you're right. Maybe they learn from Bikurim, but not necessarily. I actually like the Rash better than like Tosfos over here. The Rash makes more sense. It's not a mitzvah. They wouldn't make such a decree. They would only make a decree on a mitzvah. This is not a mitzvah.